So, I am recording sound now.
So,
Thank you. Hello. Okay, what a big day. So let's just kind of start with kind of just an overview or summary of what happened today and how that went.
well, I think one of the important things is that, if nothing else, it gives evidence that there's life after death, that we don't just somehow either just dissipate or go to some resort in the sky, but that we continue to grow, we continue to move on. Sometimes relationships continue, sometimes they don't. I think it's also interesting for those on the other side to realize how big an impact their leaving has had on the people around them. Because I don't think we ever really know how much we're loved. I don't think we ever know how much damage we do or how much contribution we make until all of a sudden we're over there and we can see the reaction of those who were here. Now, for how long depends on a whole variety of things. Sometimes people never move on very far. Sometimes they move on very quickly and aren't available. But I think basically, if for no other reason, knowing that they go on and that the relationships we had can still be worked out is important. Because I think one of the things happens today is there was closure for people. And that closure could only take place with the presence of the person about whom the issue revolved. And so I think that was a great contribution for them, and I think for anyone. And there are a lot of different levels of communication. I mean, there are those mediums who just pull facts out of the air. Not out of the air, obviously, their talent provides them with facts about what you had for breakfast or that you're wearing your mother's underwear or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's very important at an evidential level for people who are spiritually seeking. People more spiritually developed need closure. They need a sense of contact, of communication. And people who are very developed are able to reach that resolution alone sometimes. Sometimes with help, but often alone. So I love the process because it brings to people something that they can't easily get anywhere from a trustable source.
So we had three women with just three very different results is what I saw. In my opinion, and this is just me, and I want to hear what you say, but I thought we have Michaela, who didn't really know the deceased that well and learned something about herself, through it, was surprised. Everybody was surprised. And then we have Nicole, who it's so close to the surface. She's not moved on, and still is. And then we had Cynthia, who I think she felt like she was going to get something that she did not get at all, and was, also everybody was surprised. And so, I mean, if you could kind of explain that,
Well, I think first of all, we're dealing now not with somebody coming for a reading where I get the information and I transmit it in a way that's designed to help that person grow and make their life more successful. I'm conveying information from another source. That source may or may not care whether somebody got what they needed. I think with Cynthia, nobody's going to be able to tell her she's okay or that they're proud of her, because that's part of her spiritual learning, is to learn that for herself. I don't think that she wasted her time. I think she got a lot out of it. It just wasn't what she had sought, because that wasn't available from an outside source. In terms of Michaela, that was interesting because they were so very differently put together as people, so far apart in time, and yet so similar in the issues and ideas, and which kept her feeling close to him. And then with Nicole, that was a shattering, healing experience. And I think she got as much out of our conversation afterward as she did out of the conversation with that spirit. One of the interesting things is that with the last reading, or the last channeling, I couldn't figure out why I was sitting there. And then when I said to her, do you have a physical condition? She said, yes. And so that gave me a little reassurance, because understand that I have no connection with these spirits. So my only verification is from the people they've come to speak with, or when things like that happen over which I have no control, but which obviously make the experience more credible.
So let's like to transition into some just general background questions for the beginning of it. When did this all start for you? Like, how did it evolve into channeling? Where did it start? The psychic feelings and abilities. I mean, can you kind of walk me through that time?
Very briefly, I was a year sober, and I read a book that followed me around until I read it. And then I read everything I could find on the subject, which was not a great deal in those days. There were a lot of books on psychics and stories about psychics. Brad Steiger and Jess Stern wrote most of those books. And so I grew up reading that material. And then I wore out my friends, so they sent me a client who had to have been made of polyester. She could do a 3-hour reading each week, because I didn't believe she was getting her $5 worth. Because you have no way of measuring that. Nobody would help. Nobody would step up. People were perfectly willing to use it, but not be helpful. And for a time, I had to take trailway buses to New York because a friend I knew had some friends there to make enough money to stay in Boston, which is where it all started. But everything in my career has come out of nowhere, and it has come totally without preparation. I knew nothing about mediumship. A female partner who became a partner used a Ouija board. I had never seen anything like that. And then one night I get a call from a client saying, my wife is in convulsions and she wants you. And I went over and she was in full possession. The spirit was throwing her around. At one point in time, it broke her ankle. But, and I had to figure out what to do. There were no teachers, no trainers. Now, the upside of that was that I didn't get into attitude. I didn't get into thinking I was the know-all and be-all. I get into seeing things to help people grow rather than just make them feel better. And the real money in my profession is making people feel better without asking them to do anything. Sadly, I chose the other direction, and you'd better be willing to do something with your life if you're going to come to me, because you're not going to forget the experience. But I love what I do, so it doesn't matter. But that's over a long period of time. And
when you channel a spirit,
mm-hmm.
Can you explain the process? You're looking at the picture, hearing the person, and then what it feels like? Or?
Well, channeling is a collective word. There are many types of channeling. There's hearing what the spirit is saying and communicating it to the audience, to whoever the audience might be. There's letting the spirit speak through you and say what it has to say. And then there's getting out of the way and letting it take over your body to communicate. So we did the second one today. it's important to remember that people are no better or smarter when they die than they were when they were here. It's an ongoing process, not a graduation. Many institutions have found it profitable to make it seem like graduation and all is well. But that really isn't the reality. And before the tragedy of 304, when a pagan emperor wrote the Bible and eliminated reincarnation and created the victim mentality, people have been very, very willing to make money by people feeling guilty and victimized and being the intercessor for relief. But the reality is that we die as an ongoing process. It's not about knowing what's right, it's about learning what works. And I think these communications are part of that. Because they had 3 different levels of having processed what they went through when they were here as spirits.
Is there anyone you can't reach?
Sure, anyone that's not willing to open up. And there are people born without the ability to believe, either in God or in what I'm doing, or because their learning lesson is to own who they are, and anything that would dilute that isn't allowed. So they're born without that capability. And that's just as valid as the person that's born totally a believer in everything, who needs to learn to get a reality check and move forward with their life. I have done readings, although this isn't channelings, but I've done readings and gotten some very nasty letters. One of the nastiest called me a year later and asked me if I would be willing to do a reading because he had just listened to his CD and realized, oh. Because it isn't always that we're unwilling to look, it's sometimes we're unable. And something like this can move that forward. So.
When you're channeling a spirit, oftentimes you can talk about it afterwards, so you're able to hear it while it's happening. Can you
Well,
explain?
because I stay on my body.
Okay.
But I can't tell you now what they said because it's been too long.
Yeah. So immediately afterwards you
Yeah.
you can
Because it's none of my business.
yeah. So we talked about how it can help people. We've covered a lot of this already.
Well, and you know, there's an excitement level. And that excitement level is partly magic. And I don't have any problem with magic. I suffered no permanent damage believing in Santa Claus. Do you know? And got a lot of good out of it. And some of it, I think, is the shock of getting objective information without an agenda. Because as a psychic, I'm giving you objective information about you. I don't have the access to grind that therapists have and philosophical people have and religious people have and so on. I look at you, I get that information, and I communicate it to you with as much understanding and compassion and help as I can. But I can't tell you what's right for you, only you can. I can see what's wrong in your life and how you can fix it, but I'm not living that life, so I don't know what that's going to entail for you to do. So my job is insight. Therapists can be very helpful. I've worked with therapists where the client took the CD to the therapist and they worked on it together and shortened therapy considerably. But so I certainly have no axe with that. But when I do a reading, it's totally about you. It's totally what works for you. It's about what will help you help you. And that coupled with the excitement can sometimes let insights in that wouldn't be able to come in any other way. And the other thing is I've had a hellacious life. So nobody can be sitting on that chair across from me and have been through or not done something that I haven't been through or been close enough to understand. So there's never any judgment, because I totally get it. Even the off-base stuff, I totally get that thought process, and therefore can be some helpful in helping them see where it falls through or is thin or whatever. And that, coupled with the other two aspects of it, really make it an experience that's exciting. And I think every time they re-listen to it, it's new.